always very badly lit. I cannot see anything. Секогаш е многу лошо осветлено, не можам да гледам. Доцниме еден филм, еден краток филм, и немаме баш техничка поддршка, така што ова веројатно ќе оди на два јазици во многу пократка форма од планираното, бидејќи ми треба двојно повеќе време за да го преведувам симултано, ама ќе се потрудам да ги покријам главните пунктови. We're late, we're a movie late, a short movie, so I will have to translate simultaneously into English for our dear guests that are present here. I will try to cover as much as I can, but probably I will not cover as much as I want to because we have lost quite a lot so far. As you know, my task is to announce and introduce the last film for this year's edition. And it is not an easy task because that film is a film by Jan-Lik Goдар, and it is his very last film, a short film called Сценарија. Значи, мојата задача годинава не е воопшто лесна, треба да го воведам последниот заклучен филм за ова годинешното издание, а тоа е филм на Жан-Лик Годар и никогаш не е лесно да се воведува филм на Жан-Лик Годар. Но можам да кажам дека пред 3 години целото издание на Филозофскиот филмски фестивал беше посветено на Годар и тогаш имавме среќа, можност и чест да ги прикажаме неговите истории на филмот пред храбра публика од преку 11 луѓе во кинотеката. Тоа е едно од монументалните уметнички филмски дела во историјата на 20-тиот век. 3 years ago, the entire edition of the Philosophical Film Festival was dedicated to Jan-Lik Goдар. It was then that we had the honor and privilege to screen his Histoire du cinéma, one of the monumental works of art and cinema art in the entire history. They were watched by an incredible number of 11 people. But it was an enjoyment and indeed a privilege to be able to introduce to the Macedonian audience one of the great works of cinematic art. Веднаш потоа, наредната година, ни беше посветена на Маја Дерен, а последнава година беше посветена на Пиер Паоло Пазолини во чест на 50 години од неговото брутално убиство. Right after Godard, we dedicated the next year's edition to Maja Deren, and then last year's edition was dedicated to Pier Paolo Pasolini, remembering him on the 50th anniversary of his brutal murder for just being a human being. Тоа не го кажав на македонски, ама добре да го кажам, значи 50 годишнина од неговата смрт, кога убиен поради тоа што бил човек. И ми се чини дека е многу угодно што оваа година ќе го затвориме ова издание со еден филм на Годар, во кој што има некој дереновски колаж и визуелна референца по кој знае кој пат кај Годар, токму кон Пазолини, давајќи некој непланиран, но убав пресек на тоа што се случувало овие неколку минати години во рамки на овој фестивал. It is only fitting that this year we are going to close this edition of the film festival with a short by Godard, which features some Derenesque collage techniques and a mighty haunting visual reference to Pier Paolo Pasolini. Yet again, that happens often in Godard, but this time it is to King Oedipus. You're going to see that. In fact, you're going to see many references in Scenarios, which is a movie that lasts about 18 minutes. And presumably, it was done by Godard in the very last days of his life and completed just one day before he decided to call it quits with life, the world, and the thereafter, because I don't believe that he thought that there was anything after. Значи, сега ќе го гледаме Сценарија, кој што има практично два наслови, како истории на филмот и во еднина сценарија и во множина сценарија, заради тоа што С-то е во заграда. Ќе ви објаснам подоцна ако имам време за тоа зошто. Но филмот е правен во последните години од Годаровиот живот и комплетиран, наводно, барем според неговите најблиски соработници, еден ден пред да одлучи да заврши со својот живот и со се што следува по него, ако воопшто има нешто. И филмот е многу интересен вид на колаж, една техника што Годар ја воведува уште од 2018 година, кога некако се ориентира кон самите почетоци на филмот како медиум и баш на едно место вели дека би сакал да направи нешто како Маркеровиот лажете и поради тоа некако се придвижува од овие движечки слики кон колажи, кон комбинација од слики, нешто што е практично начинот на кој што е изградено делото кое што претходно го спомнав, историја на филмот. И интересното е што овдека тоа ќе можете да го видите во два различни вида и формати. Значи, прво ќе го гледате во сценарија, во рамки на краткиот филм, а потоа ќе гледате и експозе за филмот, што би го најавил филмот сценарија. Што е само некој елоквентен француски начин да се каже експозе за трейлерот за филмот кој што ќе го гледате. Значи, I forgot I should say this in English now. So the film that we are, I suppose it is tiring to hear the same thing twice if you understand both languages, but it is the protocol. So the film that you're about to watch, Scenarios, it is 18 minutes long, and it will be followed by twice as long expose for the film that announces the film Scenarios, which is a fancy French way of saying expose for the trailer to Scenarios. But the expose is a trailer to Scenarios just as much as this evening is the opening night at Cannes Film Festival, which is to say, well, they're both film festivals, and they're both film festivals, and they happen around the same time, and it would be quite absurd to I'm getting mixed signals. Should I lengthen or should I shorten? Okay. What was I saying? It sounded like a funny comparison. Yeah, I said that the expose that's supposed to be an expose to the trailer of Scenarios is a trailer of that kind to Scenarios as much as this evening is the opening night of Cannes, because they're both somewhat film festivals and they both happen around this time. And well, it will be far more absurd to say the opposite thing. One question, by the way. Does everybody here understand English? Yes. Should I translate in Macedonian? Is it boring to translate in Macedonian? Is it boring to say the two things? Give me any sign, because I don't know whether I'm boring you or whether it is... Should I just talk in English? Yes? Everybody agrees? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I will not translate myself any longer. And I don't know whether I was translating from Macedonian to English or the other way around. I kind of lost the thread somewhere along the middle. This wasn't supposed to happen this way, if it's not obvious so far. So anyway, I was talking about the expose, and it is not, it is pretty much announcing a film that you are not going to watch. It is interesting that the producers and the distributors share both of these films. and they want them to be shown together, and only in that order. So first Scenarios, the very last film of Godard, and then the Expoze, which was actually filmed 3 years before that, and it is basically an interview with Godard during which he explains the creative method behind this new technique of his, which was already implemented in the image book, and most of his last films implement the same technique. But it is interesting, it is like Denis de Rougemont says in the image book, that it is like thinking with hands, and most of the expose is Godard showing what he wants to do with the film through the movement of his hands and through his words. And it is fascinating to see him at that age with his still sharp mind, unable to remember the name of this actress here, of that actor there, but still pretty much as sharp as always, and as dedicated to his art as he was at the very beginning. What is Scenarios about? That is a question I don't think anybody will ever be able to answer. But that is why you should watch this film many times over. Like, there are many interesting references, some of which are pretty obscure, like the sentence that is repeated several times over, that is twice over, because the film is consists of 2 parts. So there is the first part called DNA, and then the second part MRI, and both of them obviously reference some things that are pretty fundamental and ontological. So life, death, Genesis, eschatology, the beginning, the end. And there is like one line: in the bowels of the earth, a tired old mechanism quivered, which is apparently a quote by a very obscure Dutch science fiction author, which it is very difficult to find. Why did Godard choose that quote? And I think I didn't have the time to check that he uses the same quote in image book. I don't know. But still, when you watch it and when you hear it, especially with the audio transposed against the very same words but said in a slower manner, it feels like something is trembling, and it feels like this is the end. And it feels like not the end of Godard, but the end of cinema as art, the end of the world itself. And there are many like juxtaposed images and even superimposed images during the movie, which obviously try to convey some kind of a message. Like, there is one string of images where you see Brigitte Bardot in Mépris when she dies, and you see before that woman being eaten by a shark from Spielberg's Jaws. Then you see Brigitte Bardot, then you see Anna Magnani in Rossellini being shot, and it's obviously something that is akin to Edgar Allan Poe idea of the death of a beautiful thing, but you still don't know what actually Godard is trying to say. You feel it, and that is probably the main and I don't know other word than exceptional ability of Godard to invoke thinking through images, which is precisely what this festival is all about. So it is not just to see something, it is to be able to think through it. Now, when you read that the second part, the expose, is an expose that should announce the film of Scenarios, you think that you will hear a lot about how this film was produced. But that's when the trick happens. You watch that and you realize that that is an expose for a completely different film, at least from my watching, and I did try to watch it twice. There is almost no reference within the expose that has become part of this film Scenarios. And I think that that's why the S in the title is. So there is the Scenario, that is the film by Godard, and then we have another film which seems as if it is an explanation of the first film, but it is something much more poignant and something much more beautiful. It is the thinking of an exceptional cinematic artist about a film that he will never make. And that is probably the most touching thing about what you're about to watch now. Like, Scenarios end with Godard writing over and making several mistakes, like sitting in front of probably, well, I don't know who, one of his collaborators, and he is writing over and over again a line that some say it's by Sartre, but I couldn't find it. I think it is his, but it may be Sartre's. And he is writing it over again, and he says, well, that's it. And then you hear a voice from the behind, probably Anne-Marie, saying, okay, and the film ends. And you remember at that point that that is the last image of Godard that you are ever going to see. And you think, like, here is how one of the greatest artists of, now I have to shorten. Here is how one of the greatest cinematic artists of the last century is going away. Not with a bang, but with a whimper, as T.S. Eliot would say. But still, he does it elegantly and gently and in a way that is only his. Uncompromising, inscrutable to the end. And in a way, I don't know if this film is just yet another way of capitalism being exceptionally able to appropriate even the most anti-capitalistic yearns for freedom, or is it just Godard being Godard, constantly reimagining himself, constantly rethinking himself and recreating himself to the very last day of his life? If it is the former, it seems like you shouldn't really care about the film. But this is Godard, and you can never get enough of Godard. Never.